Hello, Planeswalkers! Andrew here with a deck tech that'll require you to either break out your wallet or order some proxies to build, because we're doing Eldrazi Tribal led by Ulamog, Ceaseless Hunger. Ulamog is an indestructible 10/10 for 10 that lets you exile 2 target permanents when you cast it, and whenever it attacks, the defending player exiles the top 20 cards of their library. Ulamog alone is around $50, so to reiterate, this is not a cheap deck by any means. First, we'll go over our aggressive spells, starting with Bane of Balaged, who forces the defending player to exile 2 of their permanents when it attacks. Breaker of Armies is a 10/8 that forces all of the defending player's creatures to block it when it attacks. Deathless Behemoth can be recurred from the grave to your hand by sacrificing 2 Eldrazi Scions, which are tokens that some of our spells create. Deceiver of Form has you reveal the top card of your deck at the start of combat on your turn, and if it's a creature, you can turn all your creatures besides Deceiver of Form into copies of that card for the turn, and then you can put it on the bottom of your deck. Desolation Twin is a 10/10 for 10 that makes a copy of itself when you cast it. Eldrazi Devastator is an 8/9 for 8 with Trample. Eldrazi Mimic costs only 2 mana, and when another colorless creature enters under your control, you can change its power and toughness to match its power and toughness for the turn. Emrakul, the Promised End, also known as Not the Banned One, is a 13/13 for 13 that costs 1 less to cast for each card type in your grave. And when you cast it, you gain control of target player on their next turn, and then they get an extra turn after that. It also has flying, trample, and protection from instants. Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, is a 12/12 that draws you 4 cards when you cast it, and has Annihilator 4 that says when it attacks, defending player sacks 4 permanents. When it's put into your grave from anywhere, you shuffle your grave into your deck. Manifold Key can be tapped to either untap an artifact, or, more importantly, to make a creature unblockable. Reality Smasher has Trample and Haste, and when an opponent targets it with a spell, they must discard a card or the spell is countered. Shadow Spear can remove Hexproof and Indestructible for the turn, even when not equipped. Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre, is an indestructible 10/10 for 11 that blows up a permanent when cast, with Annihilator 4, and it shuffles your grave into your deck when it's put there from anywhere. Walker of the Wastes has Trample and gets +1/+1 for each waste you control. Finally, Whisper Silk Cloak makes equipped creature unblockable. Our support comes mostly in the form of artifacts and creatures, beginning with Artisan of Kozilek, which recurs a creature from your grave to the field when cast. Endbringer untaps on everyone's untap step and can be tapped to either hit a creature or player for 1, make a creature unable to attack or block for the turn, or draw a card. Hedron Matrix boosts equipped creatures' power by its CMC. Horizon Stone lets you keep all of your floating mana as steps and turns end, so when you have it out, you should always tap out at the end step of the player before you in turn order, since you keep the mana when you start your next turn and untap. Also, feel free to proxy this with different art. Icon of Ancestry has you choose a creature type when it enters and buffs those creatures by +1/+1. It can also be tapped to check the top 3 cards of your deck and put a creature of the chosen type into your hand. Lithoform Engine can copy spells as you cast them. When Matter Reshaper dies, you reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a permanent of CMC 3 or less, you can play it for free. Otherwise, it goes to your hand. Mirage Mirror can become a copy of an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land for a turn. Mystic Forge lets you look at the top card of your deck anytime, and cast it if it's an artifact or colorless non-land card, and it can be tapped to exile the top card of your deck. Ruin Processor gains you 5 life when it's cast if you choose to put an exiled card an opponent owns into their grave. Skittering Invasion makes 5 Eldrazi spawn that can be sacked for colorless mana. Staff of Nin draws you an extra card each turn. Strionic Resonator can copy a triggered ability. You can also proxy this with different art. When Thought-Knot Seer enters, you can choose and exile a card in an opponent's hand, and when it dies, an opponent draws a card. Ugin's Nexus prevents opponents from getting extra turns, and when it's put in your grave, you get an extra turn and it gets exiled. Ugin the Ineffable makes your colorless spells cost 2 less to cast, among other abilities. Our defensive spells include All is Dust, which forces everyone to sack all their colored permanents, which does not affect us in the slightest. Commander's Plate gives equipped creature protection from all colors not in its color identity, which, in our case, is protection from all colors. Kozilek, the Great Distortion's biggest ability is that it lets you discard a card to counter a spell with equal CMC. Nivenaral's Disc can be sacrificed to destroy all creatures, artifacts, and enchantments. Scour from Existence exiles a permanent. Spine of Ishsaw destroys a permanent when it enters, and goes to your hand if it would ever go to the grave. Titan's Presence has you reveal a colorless creature, and exile a creature if its power is less than the revealed creature's power. Finally, Void Winnower prevents your opponents from casting even CMC spells and from blocking with even CMC creatures. In a deck with a mana curve that goes well past 7 CMC spells, especially without green to help ramp us, we need some colorless mana ramp. Belby's Portal has you choose a creature type as it enters, and it lets you pay 3 and tap it to put a creature of the chosen type on the field from your hand. Blightherder lets you process 2 cards to create 3 Eldrazi Scions that can be sacked for mana. Burnished Heart can be sacked to grab you 2 basic wastes. Chromatic Orrery can be tapped for 5 colorless and lets you spend mana as if it were mana of any color. Conduit of Ruin lets you search up a CMC 7 or greater creature when you cast it and put it on top of your library. It makes your first creature you cast each turn cost 2 less to cast. Dreamstone Hedron taps for 3. Everflowing Chalice can be kicked by 2 as many times as you want, and it gets a charge counter for each time it's kicked, and then taps for colorless mana equal to the number of charge counters on it. Firemind Vessel taps for any 2 different colors. Forsaken Monument gives your creatures +2/+2, adds a colorless mana whenever you tap a permanent for a colorless, and gains you 2 life when you cast a colorless spell. Gilded Lotus taps for 3 mana of any 1 color. Hedron Archive taps for 2. Kozilek's Channeler is a 2 mana dork. Mind Stone taps for colorless. When Oblivion Sower is cast, it exiles 4 cards off an opponent's library, and you can put any number of lands exiled this way onto your field. Oracle's Vault lets you impulse draw and get a brick counter, and if it has 3 brick counters on it, you can cast the exiled card for free. Palladium Mirror taps for 2. Quicksilver Amulet can be paid into and tapped to play a creature for free. Soul Ring is the classic that taps for 2. Solemn Simulacrum grabs you a land when it enters and draws a card when it dies. Sword of the Animist searches up a land whenever a equipped creature attacks. Thought Vessel taps for 1 and removes your hand limit. Thrawn Dynamo taps for 3. Urgolem's Eye taps for 2. Warden of Geometries taps for 1. And finally, Worn Power Stone taps for 2. Our land base starts with Bonder's Enclave, which taps for a colorless and can draw you a card. Field of the Dead makes Zambies. Guildless Commons taps for 2. Majoring Network taps for 1, or it can get a storage counter, or can lose all its counters and be tapped for mana equal to the number of counters removed. Opal Palace taps for any of our colors, so colorless, and if we use it to cast our commander, it gets +1/+1 for each time it's been cast this game. Path of Ancestry taps for colorless and can scry when it's used to cast an Eldrazi. Reliquary Tower taps for a colorless and removes your hand limit. Sanctum of Ugin can search up a colorless creature when you cast one of our 7 CMC or greater spells. Shrine of the Forsaken Gods taps for 1, or for 2 if you control 7 or more lands. Temple of the False God taps for 2 if you have 5 or more lands. Tomb of the Spirit Dragon can tap to gain you a life for each colorless creature you control. We run the Tron package of Urza lands that tap for a colorless, unless we control all 3, in which case they tap for 7 together. War Room can be tapped to draw us a card. Lastly, we run 20 Wastes. And now you are equipped to annihilate your foes with eldritch horrors, and scoff at pitiful colored mana. Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Have a great day, y'all.